Hi class, this is Mr. Hall, and I am going to record and make some recordings for you on some of the chapters related to the textbook. And so welcome to chapter 1 for ENT 220, our leadership course. Again, this is the textbook. Again, cannot reiterate more how important it is for you to obtain a copy of the textbook. I know that some of you are, concerned about whether we use the textbook in this course or not. I will tell you I use the book extensively. PowerPoints would not be sufficient for you to get the information for a passing grade. And on exams, we typically will use case studies and case questions from the textbook. So it would be really difficult for you to be able to answer questions on the exam related to the course if you have not obtained a textbook. So highly encourage you to get one. If you don't have one at the moment, the best way and quickest way in which to obtain one is through our bookstore. So contact our bookstores and they will put a package together for you for pickup. So that's probably the fastest way at this point now that the semester has begun. So here we are in chapter 1. We're talking about the nature of leadership. We have on the screen, as you can see, a definition of leadership. And this is really a difficult thing because trying to be able to define what a leader is can be very subjective because people have different views of what leadership is. If we didn't have differing views in that, we would never have contested and difficult elections like we do. This one is a fairly good one. The book points out always it seems the concept of leadership eludes us or turns up in another form to taunt us again with its slipperiness and complexity. So we have invented an endless proliferation of terms to deal with it, and still the concept is not sufficiently defined. This is written by experts that will agree that being able to define leadership can be an extraordinarily difficult thing to do. So there are a bunch of different types of things that we talk about in regards to trying to put some kind of definition on exactly what a leader is. And one of the things that comes out very early in the textbook is what we call the leader-member exchange theory. The idea is that defining a leader is really not just looking at the person that we think may be a leader or may have leadership qualities, but we also have to look at the followers. How do followers respond as well? So the response of followers to a particular individual will also help us define really whether a person is a leader or not a leader. So it really depends on what we call member exchange or follower involvement as well. So again, leadership, a behavior of an individual, directing activities of a group towards a shared goal. That's a pretty common definition that we hear quite a bit of. We see other words that you can see on your screen, being influential, or influencing activities towards achievement. Articulating a vision is another one that we hear quite a bit of when we talk about leaders. Giving purpose is another one. Meaningful direction, a collective effort. Starting a change process, being adaptive, making sense of what people are doing together, influencing and motivating people. All of these things fall under different legitimate definitions of what leadership really is. So we took all of those things, we kind of put them into a package, and we came up with, the book comes up with a little bit more specific definition of what they think is a leader based on some of this leader-member exchange theory. Leadership is a formal or informal, contextually rooted and goal-influencing process that occurs between a leader and a follower or groups of followers in an institution. So the first thing we want to do when we look at this is we want to look at the fact that leaders can be formal. In other words, they might have a formal title or they're recognized as a formal leader. But then we also have leaders that we really define as informal. These are people that don't necessarily have a title that says they're a leader, but their personality and their sphere of influence will make them much more of a leader. In fact, many times informal leaders are more powerful and more influential than people that are formally in a leadership position. They are rooted in goal influencing processes. So we're all about reaching goals. So leaders set goals for followers, and the followers follow because they feel that this leader is going to lead them towards the goal that they're trying to get. And they are also involved, obviously, in follower groups. So followers, groups of followers will, have to be in place. So a leader who leads no people is not really a leader, right? We have to really look and say, are followers following them? And are there groups of followers that follow them? And why are they following them? So as you can see, again, from what we're talking about, the followers make a big difference on whether we identify a person as a leader or not. And all of these processes happen within some type of an institution, some kind of a formal institution, whether it's a government or a business. For example, even in a family, these can happen as well. So what are some of the controversies related to defining leadership? Of course, it can be a very specialized role, how things are influenced, what kind of influence attempts are made. It can be based on reason or sometimes emotions. It can be a direct or indirect leadership. What is leadership versus management? So again, all of these things add into why it's so difficult to actually identify what is a good definition of what a leader really is. I particularly like to pay attention to number 4, because we're seeing more and more of this now with the the constant bombardment of 24-hour news that we experience, the social media and all the controversies are related to social media these days. We do find that we're defining leaders more and more in our modern society with emotions rather than reason. Not that we don't necessarily have good leaders, but leadership is all about an emotional feeling now in modern day. And I think social media has had a huge effect on that. As you guys can attest to going through this last election cycle, emotional, hate or love or extreme dislike or passionately loving a leader, regardless of whether they are qualified as a leader or not. And that really goes in any of the political directions that we see. So there's a very emotional attachment that we're seeing a big growth in. And I think social media has had a lot to do with that. So the book finally says, well, let's come up with some kind of a definition. So this is the book's definition based on all this discussion that they've had in the beginning of this chapter. Leadership is the process of influencing others to understand and agree about what needs to be done and how to do it, and the process of facilitating individual and collective efforts to accomplish shared objectives. Basically, we're influencing people and we're getting people to agree on what needs to be done, what's the goal that needs to be done, how we're going to get there, and then we, as a leader, we try to facilitate the efforts of people either individually or in groups to accomplish whatever those objectives are. If we are not accomplishing the goals, then the leader becomes non-effective. And eventually the followers stop following them simply because they don't get anything done. And again, we've experienced that quite a bit in our own society. So ways leaders can influence effectiveness again. So how do leaders affect an organization and how they are effective? They can choose the objectives that they want to pursue. They influence the motivation of members. If you're working for a person who's leading in a business that is not a nice person, is narcissistic, you're not motivated to work for them. Where somebody who's nice, who works with you and encourages you to grow in your work, is somebody that we typically like and are more motivated to work for. There has to be some kind of a trust and cooperation. Otherwise, we won't be successful. They have to coordinate work activities. So work activities, what people do when, all of these organizational skills are very, very important. Nobody wants to work for a leader who is disorganized. They allocate resources. So leaders allocate the resources to their followers. They share new knowledge that they get, so they share that. They enlist support and cooperation from people outside of the organization. They design a formal structure and programs and systems things like how we reward people. You get a pay raise. How do you get bonuses? And they also facilitate a shared belief and values of members. These are people who believe the same things that the leader believes. And that's very important. And we see that again in social media and 24-hour television, that influencers, particularly in the political realm, they want to get people to believe what they believe. And those are the people that are really committed to them, whether they're good leaders or not. That's typically how they try to operate. Some things about, again, the causal change of effects of two types of leader behavior. So we have people who inspire vision and how do they get there, and then people who are much more a kind of a coaching kind of person, or can be a combination of both. That will kind of get you also to the same types of goals. So it does talk a little bit more about that. So how do we study leadership in the context of what we are talking about? We survey people, so we're always, surveying what people believe are leaders and what leaders are successful and not. We can observe and we can experiment in order to be able to determine, who our leaders are. Some of the major perspectives that we want to evaluate as we're looking at leadership, are what are the characteristics of a leader? So characteristics of a leader, what are the traits or values or what are the things that in their personality that lend them to be more leaders, right? So we're kind of looking at that. But then we also have to flip the coin, right? We have to look and say, well, what are the characteristics of the followers that follow these types of leaders? What are their traits? What are their skills? What are their attributes that make them want to be a follower of a particular leader? And then we have a third factor, right? So we've got three different factors that really influence leadership. The leader themselves, certainly the followers and the characteristics of that, but then we can't leave out this as well. What are the characteristics of the situation? We don't live in a vacuum. We don't live in a bubble. So the situational leadership, certain situations will lend people to lead where they didn't lead in other situations. We saw that on September 11th when the Twin Towers were attacked. We saw people that were not in leadership positions who took leadership and encouraged people to escape the buildings. And because of that, people's lives were saved. And some of these people were people that were not high on the chain of command, but in that situation, they ended up becoming more of leaders. The book continues to talk a little bit more about leadership and leadership theory. I'll finish with this. So we have several different leadership theories that we're going to talk about in the book further. The trait approach, the behavior approach, the power influence approach, a situational approach, and the value-based approach as well. And each one of those will be discussed throughout the textbook. So the book is just kind of getting you a little familiarized with each of those. I encourage you to read the book and read this particular section so that you start to get familiarized with these, because these are types of concepts that you will be seeing on further exams and further chapters. And then it finally talks about, different conceptualization. Again, all of this is just kind of giving you a quick overview of what's to come in the book that follows. Again, make sure that you've attained your book. So make sure that you have a book that you're reading. Pay attention to the announcements on the course each week. Look at the weekly learning modules so that you know what is due each week. Please take the time to look at the videos. They're not terribly long, but they're very beneficial. So I highly encourage you to look at the videos that I posted each and every week as well. I hope that you're doing well, and I will be following this up with other chapter lectures as well. Thank you for tuning in, and we will talk to you very soon. Take care.